It's not a good sign. We're just barely starting and I'm yawning already. Not good. How's everybody doing? We got a skeleton crew so far. Just a bunch of skeletons. Yeah, I think we got. Hang on, I'm pulling my slides up. I think we got that far. Okay. Um, so let me see. Yeah. So first item of business. Make sure you sign the attendance. Second item of business. Um, we are going to be online till further notice. Could be next. I mean, we could be back next week. I'll send a flare one way or the other. But I mean, case in point, I've actually had like a sore throat for the week so far since Sunday, and what in the ancient past we would have just called the sniffles, and it would have been like no big deal. And but in pandemic land, it's sort of, I mean, it's not really respectful, even if, so I actually ran and got a COVID test today. I was negative like the previous dozen COVID tests I've gotten over the last 2 years. So, but I do have a little tiny cold, so it would be the kind of thing where I wouldn't want to come into a class, you know, in this climate, in this environment, you know what I mean? Even though I'm vaccinated and boosted, um, you know. And alrighty, Mr. Seeds, yeah, it's a big advantage to me to be right here, right now. But I don't know. We are, I think we are over the golf assignment this week. Joshua, when can we expect to see the golf assignments graded this week? I promise. Um, Gunnar, I think, prefers in person. We'll get back to mixing it up. We'll figure it out. Um, okay, let me see. What else? We'll figure out the class schedule. Was there any other housekeeping? Oh, I just wanted to say that I was just kind of uh, watching the discussion go by on the Discord chat, and really, I think it's great, to kind of jump on. We talked a little bit about this the first week or so, but relative to the Head First Design Patterns book and those assignments, helping each other out, supporting each other. I think it's great, and you have my complete support. Um, and that I just encourage you to be there and help each other out, and give and get support and help. So, did you actually, Tyson? Nice. Yeah, I almost made that mistake once, Tyson, where you're trying to give a little point and you wind up flipping the bird instead. Um, all right. Okay. So let me talk about UML and start talking a little bit about use case design. And I'm going to double back to Norman. Oh, and the design of everyday things. I did want to share with you. This is one that I saw. What is this? Check out the little meme, the little graphic. What is it? What is it? Midget the town down? What is it? Anybody have any sense on this one? Is it? Oh, I think it's. I think I know. I think I just figured out what it is. It's the Midtown Get Down. Yeah, you had to read it in every way counterintuitively. Basically, the Midtown Get Down. That's horrible. That's the midget. I like the midget the town down myself, but connected. Okay, how about now? Okay. Yeah, I got my earbuds to the laptop, and every so often it just like loses and then resets, and when it resets, it throws the other sound settings off, and then you got to go back and redo it. Okay, so we're good for now. Yeah, please shout out if we lose track of it again. Okay, I wanted to talk about UML. I think I started to say that unified was a unification of various other models that existed in the market at the time. So one of the things I want you to understand is that UML or any other modeling language, whatever it happens to be, these days, like all technology, they're just something that somebody pulled together. Somebody decided, we need a way of representing certain things. They decided, hey, I always draw a box, and somebody's like, me too, and then like, yay, box, and then there's a box, and then there's a line, and it just like slowly evolves. And in this case, you get some of the luminaries in the field at the time, 30 years ago or whenever, 35, and then you get them to duke it out and come to kind of an understanding or an agreement about how to do whatever, and they blend their thing together. They all do better academically. They make more money. It's a market. Okay, there's a market decision behind it. It's not. It's not. Um, you know, Academic research is not. This devoid of ulterior motives. Okay, and UML is no different. It was a pragmatic marriage of different competing forces, and that makes better, really more tenure, more academic recognition, more of whatever the coin of the realm happens to be, including money. Um, so, but anyway, so what I want to just say about UML is, in my experience, I haven't seen um, a lot of UML in its full glory in industry. Okay. And where you tend to see it is in bigger companies, bigger organizations. Like I'm thinking like NASA. I don't know if NASA uses UML, but if they did, it wouldn't surprise me. It's the bigger organizations that tend to, be in a position to afford. I need some. I need some stimulant. This is water, so it's not going to help me. Um, so what I think they do, Dallin, so Dallin asks abridged UML. I would probably say more like pigeon UML. In other words, this is the key. Big companies might actually have official UML done correctly by the book. And you have access to the Martin Fowler book on the Safari stuff, right, on the Safari books online, which is the O'Reilly books. Um, and I've given you some reading assignments out of that, okay? And so if we're never going to use it, why do we have to learn it? Okay, this is one of those. How like there's no dumb questions. This is actually one of them. Uh, the reason that you learn things that you're never going to use is because they change the way you think. That's why you learn things that you're never going to use. It's not all about, if I can't apply this, then it has no value. Um, so if I have been through UML, been through, understand the different kinds of figures, the different kinds of representations, then I'm in a position, when I'm having to do design, if I know that there's a thing called an interaction diagram and I've been through it, maybe I don't remember the details and maybe I'm not going to go look it up. I got to get more sleep. But it doesn't matter, because I'm still going to go, hey, wasn't there something about this, then I can either go look up UML or at least be kind of guided to think about design in a different way. Okay, that's all we're trying to do is entice you to think about design in a slightly different way. Basically, we're going to look at three different approaches: structural modeling, behavioral, and physical. And what that means is structural. Sorry, taking my sweater off. I'm Mr. Rogers. Structural would be things like class diagrams where how does this thing kind of, go together? How do we declare it? Behavioral is, what can it do? Things like methods, right? And the other thing with behavioral is, things like various kinds of interactions between objects have to be represented somehow, right? And then the physical model has to do with when this thing's actually running, what happens in practice, okay? And this is where, let me see, one more right there, but I'm going to come back to it. So the idea is that the principles show up all over the place, the concepts. I'll give you one example. There was a book by Barry Beam, classic book called Software Engineering Economics or Software Economics. It's one of the two. It's down the hall in my library. And it has to do with algorithmic cost estimation models. And nobody outside, like the Department of Defense, NASA, and things like this, uses these kinds of models. They're just too big, too cumbersome, too crazy. Okay. But I still studied it. And why did I study it? Because if I'm going to try to understand cost estimation, maybe I'm not going to go to the effort of actually using the tools and building this thing. But by studying it, I'm at least understanding all the things that Beam said and learned and did research on to understand what are the things that affect cost. So does that make sense? So you don't have to be a formal. You can study the formal process and then never do it and have your ability to do cost estimation be better. I hope that makes sense. And it really just has to do with understanding the dynamics. Same thing here. You may never draw an official UML diagram outside of this class. I don't care. It's still really, really valuable because you're going to be thinking about the fact that you got to represent these things somehow, and it can at least be a starting point, and it teaches you about the principles. Okay. Let me see. Can you repeat the name of that book? Yeah, it's called software engineering. So it's either called software engineering economics or software economics. I could run and get it. And the author is Barry Beam, which is Boehm, if somebody wants to maybe drop a link. Yeah, Tyson, I could get some snack food. That could help. Then I'd be like crunch, into the headphones. That would not be good for you guys. All right. So what I'm going to try to do as we're going to go through all the different kinds of UML diagrams in our lecture time, and the issue is going to be the same for you guys every time, which is how does this help you think about design differently? What are the questions? Remember the orders of ignorance, right? A framework in the orders of ignorance creates a mechanism that generates questions. Well, every UML type of diagram is a framework that causes you or induces you to ask a certain number of certain kinds of questions. There we go. That's it. Thank you so much. That's in the link there. Oh, and I was gonna shoot. I forgot. I'm all over the place. I was gonna just drop the link to the stream on YouTube into the channel in the link there for everybody's For your FYI, there we go. Okay, hope everyone can see that. Yeah. Okay, so um, understanding UML, understanding each of the different kinds of documents constitutes a framework. That framework generates questions like, have you thought about this? Have you thought about that? What does this do? You know, what is this? How does this impact my ability to write test cases and things like that? Okay, where is it? Yeah, okay. So this is the stuff that we're going to be looking at. Check it out. The structural class diagrams, object diagrams, behavioral. Mostly, we're going to focus on structural and behavioral use case. And the number one, believe it or not, the one that we're going to care the most about from the perspective of design is actually going to be the use case diagram. Because the use case diagram is where our system interfaces or interacts or meets the user. Okay. Sequence diagrams, state diagrams are very, very important. Sequence diagrams are very important. Class and object diagrams are classic and very important. For my money, if you only get one thing right, the one thing you have to get right is use case. So we'll break into that here when we get going. Okay. Okay, so let me pull up. So that's our little mini introduction to UML. And I am craving getting back to Don Norman, I got to admit. But okay. I'm going to be bold and push off a little bit on that. Now, in this set of slides, I've actually got, in the neighborhood of 30 slides. And, as always, a lot of it's going to be conceptual, and we'll get some practice, some practical things there as well. Okay. So the fundamental kind of backdrop, the origins of use cases, it usually just kind of starts with this notion of who's the user, what does the user care about, what is the user's experience. It's the heart and soul of everything that falls broadly under the umbrella of user experience in sort of modern, vernacular. Okay. And the most common environment, it can take a bunch of forms. For example, sometimes we just talk about scenarios where somebody's going to do a certain thing. We sometimes talk about personas, okay? And the persona is where we create a user that, a mythical user, right? We say, here's Zheng, and here's what he does, and here's how he's going to use the system, right? And here's Mark, and here's how he's going to use the system. And we create, Mark is, a professional volleyball player, whatever, and you flesh out these personas, but it's a way of trying to understand the sort of the usability motivation that lives in the users. Because if you can't understand, like why do you need, a bathroom that's located near your bedroom, ideally adjoined to your bedroom? Well, because people got to get up in the night to go pee. This is one of the reasons, right? In other words, if you don't understand how, back to Alexander, if you don't understand how humans live and do what they do, thanks, Seth. If you don't understand how people do what they do, then what you're gonna get, and this is really strikes at the heart of Don Norman and the design of everyday things. You're gonna get a sort of beautiful, maybe aesthetically pleasing um, thing, object, device, but that thing, when you actually have to like interact with it or live with it, is going to annoy you. Okay, so I want to just stop for a second and and look for, and see if you can drop into the chat or audio if you want to just unmute. But things that you've experienced where it's not that it's unattractive, it's not that it isn't beautiful or visually pleasing. It's just that when you go to actually use it, you've got this sort of miserable experience. I'm just going to give you a minute, and then I'm going to pull up something that I came across the other day. Where am I? Where am I? No, it has to be so Geek Muffin, not just okay. I agree with you on Hollywood movies, but Cairo Apple products. Got to be more specific. We need more specific. Um, James, Apple AirDrop updating and changing every time I use it. Okay. The fancy looking sinks that put out barely any water. Okay. No, Seth, vodka is not a correct answer. Okay. You're just Seth, I think you're on my list all of a sudden. Um, Bathroom stalls that open inward. Okay. Riley said I played games where the art style was very pretty but made it hard to make out what was actually happening. Yeah. Yeah, Seth, you are in a freaking mood, man. You're on a roll as well, as it were. Um, now, what else? The more pragmatic you can get, the better. Okay, I'll give you one. I'll give you a good example of the opposite. This is really about squeaking doors, is what I'm asking you about. Let me give you kind of a unexpected shiny object. Okay, this. Can you see this? This is one of my. You know how we just collect. You just collect USB drives, and you know what I mean. They're just you wind up with them for one reason or another. Well, at some point, I needed to go buy one. I don't know why, but I went and I bought this guy. Why? Because hey, Iron Man, right? I mean, if you're going to buy a USB drive, it might as well be, and it's a pretty dang good looking Iron Man, right? And so you can see there's the USB drive. Now, what is the biggest problem from a usability perspective with the classic USB? Okay, let me just take this guy. This classic USB. You pop it like that, right? And what they fixed with USB-C, if you are dialed into that, was the problem here, right? It's you can start putting it in either way. It looks like it should be symmetric, right? But the reality is, I don't know if you can see it, right? You already know this, but it's in fact only, so it looks, I don't know how this made it through, right? But it looks like you can go either way. The only thing you've got is that little seam if you're looking for it, but then you've got to remember this. And this is counter to one of Norman's kind of core design. This is why Norman doors and Don Norman and use cases are just so tightly intertwined. And I'm going to get back to the head of Tony Stark here. Um, I can remember which side is the seam and look for it, and then just remember which side they tend to be oriented. If indeed it's sort of an up down flat thing, But the reality is it isn't always, and that violates the principle of making me remember things in my head in order to use something as simple as this. And as is the case with USB-C, which do I have a handy dandy? Yeah, no, that guy doesn't reach. Hang on a second. With USB-C, yeah, no, that's not USB-C. Sorry, I have too many connectors, but some of them are not stretching. But you know what I'm talking about. It's it's just oval, and it doesn't matter which way you connect it. That's the bottom line. Okay, so this is bad. I got this mostly because I didn't have high expectations from the usability of my USB drive. I just liked Tony Stark. But what do you notice? With the head attached, it's no longer symmetric. And all I have to remember is that Tony faces up. And if I face Tony up when I put him into a USB slot that's oriented this way, if I just put him in face up, which is actually suddenly makes sense, then it works. So not only is it kind of aesthetically very cool, and you know what I mean. You got to admit. Maybe I'm being a little hyper nerdy, but that's ridiculously cool. And it also comes in a number of other Marvel figures and other things. But okay, so that's an unexpected situation where the addition of an aesthetic feature actually introduced a functional dynamic that fundamentally made the USB drive easier for me to use. And I'm pretty confident that was accidental, you know, but I think it's very, very cool. Okay. So that's what I'm talking about. Something that's that hands-on. I want to just see what else you've got looking back, scanning back. Because James, okay, coming back up, um, changing interface, right? That's a problem. But I'm looking um, more at something pragmatic. So I want to talk about what I'm not sure what's the right first name. I'll just call you L. Um, because I don't know if that other one is your first name or last name, and I'm committed to avoiding saying last names on YouTube. Fancy sinks that put out barely any water. Right, it looks beautiful, but in practice, whatever how about this one? Those speaking of like bathrooms, the automatic dispenser that puts out about 3 inches of paper. It's like you wave your hand and it's like. And you're like, ah, crap. Then you have to wait, then wave it again because you can barely tear it, and it's not enough to dry your hands. You got the idea. Um, the other one that makes me insane are the ones where the faucet is so close to the back. You know what I mean? It's like I'm going side view now. The faucet like barely clears the back, and then you have to go all the way back there to try to get some water or do anything, as opposed to being somewhere more in the center. Um, Let me see. William, no, it did not have all the movies on it. Let me see. Cairo, the settings UI on an iPhone looks good. They have an aesthetic, but they're difficult to navigate. Yeah, 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 yeah. Gunnar, I don't remember how big this drive is. Um, Kevin, it takes 3 times to. Yes, the average number of times that you have to attempt a USB drive before it goes in. Um, Let me see. All right. Yeah. Thanks, Wes, for that picture. Oh, the automatic sinks. Or how about this one, the mixed metaphor, when you walk into a restroom, like at a restaurant or public place, and one of either the sink or the towels is automated and the other, hands free, and the other one is not. So like you got like hands free towel dispenser with manual sink, or hands free sink with manual ka-chunk 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 towel dispenser. Because once your expectation is set, you're standing there at the sink. How many of you have done this where you're just like, standing there under a sink in a public restroom, and there's like handles, and you feel like an idiot, because you're just like, same thing with the towel. You're waving at the towel dispenser, but it's actually got a little handle or some kind of a push thing. Yeah, yeah, yeah. You got the idea. This is about use case things. One of the other interesting things, in my shower at my house, master bath shower. For whatever reason, there's like this much. I don't know. I'm sure it had to do with some internal structure where the pipes were running or where the studs were in the wall or whatever. But the shower head is like one third. I can't explain this. It's positioned sort of like one third of the distance on the little glass enclosure to the wall. So it's like, again, I don't know how big it is, but one third of that distance away from the wall is where the shower head comes out. But when you're a big guy like me, I'm plus sized, 6'2", and big enough. This thing is like over there, and there's not enough room to get my body over there. Plus, that's also where the soap dispenser is. It's like artificially crunching you over, so that I wind up like turning the little faucet thingy to point away from the wall toward, maybe try to get more toward the center of the shower. Okay, the point of all of this is it's a failure of use case. Now you got to think about the fish. You got to think about the fish as well. What's the standard use case for a shower? Now this is the part where you've got to look at the fish. Okay, you can't just say, what's there to say, Dr. K? You just get in the shower and then you just turn the water on and look at the fish. Where do you stand in the shower? If you're just like, I don't know, a normal shower taker, where do you go to get a shower? Assuming you're showering alone, right? Where do you go? You stand in the center of the bloody shower, And so where should the shower head be? I would say in the center of the shower stall, the shower enclosure, Because if you just stop for a second and think about it, what somebody somewhere was just like, yeah, there's a shower head. We've done our jobs. And you see a lot of really bad design of that variety. Like, we done our job because the item is there and you can check the box that it's there. But what in the crap were you thinking when you did it, in that way? And what you weren't thinking about is what the actual average person is going to do. Let me see what else we got. Okay, I was just reading Riley's 3 steps to inserting a USB drive. Right on, man. That's fantastic. Wes's shower has a little seat, but it's far enough from the head to use. Oh, like you could sit on it. Okay. I'll give you one more in the home environment. I don't know if, you guys are mostly renting. Some of you are still living at home. And maybe some of you have your own place. But, and it's just one more of these that is just such a pet peeve. It is the one where the heating ducts come up under like kitchen, main kitchen cabinet under the sink, right? Under the sink. It's under the sink in the bathrooms and in the kitchen, where for some reason they just open the heating duct right up into that wooden space. And what happens over time is it just bakes the wood. It's not built for heat. right? And AC. So it just bakes the wood, and then all the things you put underneath, uh, your sinks, whatever that happens to be, is like just stored at high temperature in the winter, or like icebox in the summer, and it damages that stuff. Hate it, hate it, hate it. Okay. Um, and now we're going to have the classic Vim. We're going to have the VI versus Emacs war, which rages after 30 years. Yeah. And by the way, if you are one of these Vim people, the VI people, um, you are somebody with an extraordinarily high, and Emacs even more so, you're somebody with an extraordinarily high tolerance for having to know all the details in your head for how to do very, very simple things. I salute you. I'm not really one of you, if that makes sense. Okay. So I hope that makes sense. You have to you have to get down to understanding what the use case really is, how the user is going to actually behave to do what you're going to do, to do the design in a way that's going to ultimately make sense. Okay. Anyway, when these things get done originally, and even really predominantly, they're sort of informally documented. You're drawing on the whiteboard, you're taking pictures of that, you're drawing boxes, you're describing somebody, but there's typically very little formality. And I'm going to go you one more, which is that in UML use case diagrams, they're still fairly informal. Okay, and I'm going to give you an example. I'm just going to jump over. Okay, that we're going to come back. I'm going to double back and come back to this. Okay, but you see the actor over here? Yeah, that's pretty informal. When you literally have like a stick figure to represent the user, and the rest of it, whatever. Um, it's pretty informal, all things considered. Okay. So this is Fowler's definition of what he calls, what a UML calls a scenario. Okay. A sequence of steps describing an interaction between a user and a system. So it can be as simple as this scenario right here. The buy a product scenario. User buys a product. The customer browses the catalog, adds the item to the shopping basket, et cetera, et cetera. The customer describes the shipping and credit card information, confirms the sale, yada, yada, yada. What a use case is typically trying to do is get you to conceptualize a particular use from a user's perspective that kind of like it exercises the system, but in a very specific kind of thread. Okay, so look at this: buy a product. The customer browses the catalog, adds desired items. When they wish to pay, they give credit card information, confirm the sale. It doesn't say, for example, what happens if you browse the catalog and you don't add the desired items, or if you add the items and then you pull them back out, or when you wish to pay, then you change your mind and you decide you want to start shopping some more, or you describe the shipping and then it's wrong, or you change your mind, or the credit card is declined. You see what I mean? Over and over and over again. It's just, this is one path through the system. Now you could have another scenario, which we could make a persona that we'll call, what name do we give to somebody who changes their mind, all the time? They're always changing their mind. Um, Mindy. Mindy. It sounds like mind, right? We'll go with Mindy, right? So Mindy, she changes her mind all the time. So we could have a scenario that's called Mindy tries to buy a product but fails. That would be our scenario. So Mindy browses around, finds something, puts it in the shopping cart, right, in the shopping basket, shops some more, changes it, goes to pay, changes her mind, removes it from the shopping cart, goes back and keeps shopping. Right? You can lay out a scenario like that, and you can attach a persona around that person if you want to, just to make it come to life. And then you can understand if you're thinking about Mindy, right? Or you can also be what would you call somebody that loves the recommendations, if you like, in an Amazon type system, right? Um, Randy, who loves the recognitions, the recommendations. Okay, so that's Randy. And in Randy's case, he shops, he lingers on a site. We say customers also bought, and Randy always clicks on one of those, all the time. And then again, you're laying out scenarios that will help to kind of drive a certain path through the system. Okay, it's obviously a big search space, right? A big set of possibilities about what can happen. And it's also meant, use cases are meant for a couple of reasons. One, we'll get to these, it drives requirements, right? If you can lay out what a user would do, you understand what it is you want your system to try to do, right? Um, it's also going to help you derive test cases, ways to sort of stress the system or flex the system. Um, it will give you, more than anything, it's going to give you a sense of the usability issues when you're going to try to, build it from a usability design perspective. Okay. So here's an example. Again, Fowler defines use case as a set of scenarios tied together by a common goal. Okay. And all we're trying to do is bring a little more structure. Okay. And this last part, check it out. Buy a product. And it's just steps. Customer browses through the catalog, selects items. This is almost a test case. So I can, speak to a number of different test cases. Okay. For example, if I'm doing test case design and I look at just the first one, customer browses through the catalog and selects items to buy. How many items? They could select no items to buy, one item to buy, two, three. And, you could just try to just put, does the whole thing break at some point, right? See what I mean? The whole system might break. So the use case, it does communicate the behavior of the system, right? How you use the system. But it also, guides you enough about it that you can actually build test cases. And I hope everybody's enjoying the thread on Linux. Rock and roll, guys. Um, I have my own opinions, and none of them make me really that happy. Honestly, I'm sort of stuck between a rock and another rock and a hard place. No, I'm gonna defer, Tyson. Yeah. Well, okay, Mike. You've got Unix underlying Mac. So when you drop into a terminal, you're running Linux. You're running Unix, not even Linux. Um, anyway, no, my biggest problem with Windows is I think that you see the sort of the DNA of the companies. You know, Windows, even though it's gotten so much better over the years, it's still, underlying everything, it still feels like Bill Gates. And Mac OS 10 still feels like Steve Jobs. There's the imprint of the predominant ego driving the design persists. That's my, and then Linux, just has to, I don't know, there's just a market share inertia that it's always lacked. You know, how's that? That's my short, my short version. And then I can talk about the Mac keyboard, which is another the hateful. I hate the little butterfly keyboard, which was atrocious, horrible, horrible. Okay, the worst keyboard I ever typed on. Okay, so do you understand this idea that a use case design, a use case document or diagram can um, drive your testing because it's supposed to be what the system is capable of doing. It's also not thorough. It's not everything, but it's sort of like it guides you, but it doesn't flesh out all the contingencies. You have to document that in either by sort of refined sub use cases, you know. Um, what else? And that's kind of what these. You see where it says alternative authorization failure at step 6, system fails to authorize credit purchase. And again, you can use this principle to build your documents however you want. Okay, which leads us to this last bullet. The way you do this thing is art, not science. You know, it's not it's even using UML diagrams. There's a lot of judgment calls that you get to make about how to set it up, how to organize it, how to draw your pictures, how to do what you do. Okay. Another thing about use cases, and then I'm going to probably, what are we doing on time? I want to drop back. Yeah, so Kevin asked, can we outline the difference between use cases and sequence diagram? I'll tell you the first, we will, Kevin. The big one really is that use cases represent an external view of the system. There's no internal implementation. Sequence diagrams, which we're gonna get to those, but sequence diagrams have to do more with the behavior, documenting the actual behavior. Use cases are more documenting either, yeah, experience versus inner mechanisms. Use cases are more documenting maybe the user's um, behavior in some respects, right? But the user always interfaces or interacts with the system, and the system doesn't pop open. It's kind of black box, as they call it. Okay. Um, what else? You don't have to draw a diagram to do use cases. Doing, something like that is use case design. You can do it textually. Okay. You can do it with some pictures to show the basic idea, drawings, pure text, whatever. And so how you organize use cases, how many? You could just have one and it's just our driving vision. But that's not going to help you a lot when it comes time to design the little subparts. And the other reason that you do, we talked about this last time, the other reason that you do design and build diagrams and models is so that you can get some sanity checking on the design. Okay. Get somebody else to look at it and sanity check it. So, that whole notion of how narrow a use case are you going to define? And there's no right or wrong answer here. How much detail do you put in or not? It's kind of stylistic, I guess, but I'm a fan of trying to, really get this thing narrowed down, whether it's written down and other people can look at the document or whether it's in your head if you're small enough project that it can stay in one person's head. And so here's the way we draw it, okay? Basic UML components. So again, that is a use case. And it doesn't look like a diagram, and I agree. It's not really a diagram per se. And then this is more of a diagram, okay? So, and again, the tiny little details, I really don't care. I want to go through them together just because it makes you think. But the particular details, I don't really care. Okay. Like, wait, how's that thing supposed to be drawn? I don't know. Double check it, look it up. You know, it's the kind of thing I could like make you memorize, and it's going to be gone in about 10 minutes once you're done. And then it's going to be readily available to look back up. So that's why I really don't care. So with use case diagrams, what we do is um, extension points are sort of like, variations on the idea. And I can also do sort of generalization, specialization, inheritance, basically, where I can take use cases and, manage abstraction kind of high or low, right? So like this use case consists of the browsing use case, the purchasing use case, you know what I mean? You can identify, and that would be more kind of aggregation rather than generalization. But I can do actual inheritance where I take the use case. It's that one with the following refinement, with this thing added or with one thing changed. And that way, the same reason we do generalization and specialization in object-oriented programming and design, it saves, the the time and effort you did. You don't have to duplicate everything you said here with one change. It's that guy with one change. And that's kind of where the generalization stuff kind of comes into play. Again, syntax on the drawing, I don't care. Deeply don't care. But if you've at least thought about this, then when the moment hits and you're doing it, hopefully it'll help you out a little bit. Um, and then this, it's just an ugly graphic. It comes from Fowler. It's but ugly, and therefore I don't like the aesthetics. But at least it illustrates, to you where that stuff's kind of coming from. And I'm going to just talk about that for a second. I wanted to just look at one thing. Yeah, I'm going to. There's a bunch of slides here. I'm gonna just talk about this for just a second, and then bounce over to Don Norman, because this is just a little dry, and Norman is anything but dry. Dallin, is it normal for there to be free-floating parts that aren't connected? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I think to me, this looks like a bit of a hodgepodge, you know? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't like it. Let me put it that way, Dallin. I don't know what's normal. You know what I mean? I don't have enough of a view into, what is predominant in, out there in the industry, but I don't like it. So let's go with that. Um, I'd rather have, you know, the accounting system, have its own little diagram called update accounts. But what it does kind of show you is that when you see like the trader, you can see that here's the actors, that's a label. Here's a generalization, that's how we do it with the little triangle. And there's the include, like, thank you. I couldn't have figured that one out. And this is an example. All the things in the ovals are use cases. But this is one where, this is valuable to show things that a trader can do. And again, the hard part with this is going to be the case throughout our time looking at Fowler stuff. The biggest problem we've got is that we're not intimately familiar with the examples that he's using. So we're like, trading manager. What are we trading? What's the salesperson doing? What's the accounting system? I don't know. So anyway, but you can see that person can interact with these. Trader can interact with some of these, et cetera, et cetera. We'll come back to this in more detail. But before we do that, Let me pull up some Don Norman. Let me see. Let me see. Okay. And the thing is that every time there's this tight interconnectedness between use case diagrams and Don Norman. Um, but that's the book, and the cover there, that little teapot, is meant to be provocative, to get you to think about, something that looks fine but has lost track of its usability. And Norman, it's been a while since I've reread it, but Norman really rips on the idea that in these sort of design awards and design competitions that exist for various, kinds of devices or objects or what have you, uh, the prize usually goes to the best aesthetic, which has to do with, you know, how it feels emotionally, how it looks, how you sort of respond to it at a sort of an emotional level, right? Um, and then when you actually go to use it, it sucks. You know, like, have you ever seen a chair that looks really beautiful? Like, I love that chair, or it's so classic, or it's so whatever, and then you go to actually use it and it's just not comfortable, or whatever the thing happens to be. I've seen it all the way at the scale um, of like homes, that you're like, that home is so beautiful, I love it, and then it's just, when you actually go to try to live in it, it's just not a livable home, right? So that's kind of, you know relevant, to this idea. It's great that it's beautiful, but in practice, what is it like? So, so the inspiration, Norman's part of the inspiration here. My own experiences are part of the inspiration. Philip Armour is part of my inspiration. So this is Norman. Um, Give that a read. When you have trouble with things, whether it's figuring out whether to push or pull a door, or the arbitrary vagaries of the modern computer and electronics industry, it's not your fault. Don't blame yourself. Blame the designer. It's the fault of the technology, or more precisely, of the design. And it really, really comes back to use case design, right? If you don't understand, going back to, the picture on the cover, the imaginary teapot, if you don't understand that tea is really hot, or any kind of hot water that you're using a teapot for, and that you need to pour it away from yourself, right? Maybe this wins some award because it looks so cool. I don't know. Um, I got to go cough drop mode. I'm losing my voice, so I hope this doesn't go clacky clack in the headphones. And if it does, I apologize in advance. Okay. One of the things that I've seen from people, starts really with people my age. It used to be people, kind of in the generation older than mine, that used to make me crazy. Is I remember there was this one doctor's office, and they had their computer system. This is with the big monitor, the big CRT, you know, monitor, and this is the old days. And this is like, I don't know, Windows 2000, or I don't know. But I remember there was this lady that used to like take your copay or do whatever. I remember looking at the software and it just looked horrific. And then she would always apologize and say, I'm just not really good with the computer. And you know that when somebody refers to their computer as the computer, that they're from like a you know what I mean? Like a pre-civilized, a pre-industrial. They're from a pre-technology society. They're from the 50s, you know? Right? The computer. The computer. Or, Dallin, have you ever actually heard anyone say it? The Google, when they call it the Google. I mean, yeah, really? That's awesome. I mean, most of us will jokingly refer to the Twitter, the Facebook, the Google, the TikTok. Um, let's ask the Google. Yeah. Anyway, it's that hands off. Here's another one, by the way, that you can detect when you've got somebody doing your marketing and they're from a generation ago or a couple generations ago. They'll use expressions like with the click of a mouse. It's one of my favorites. With the click of a mouse. Okay, the only reason that you say with the click of a mouse is because it's still foreign. You know? Do you say do you say in touting the advantages of your horseless carriage, with the turn of a key, I am transported to the grocery store in minutes? No, no. We've had the horseless carriage for quite a while, and we don't refer to it in this way. It's just with the shooting of a horse. Seth, go away. Um, no, but anyway, but she used to always say, like, every single time. She must have said this to everybody because I got it every time. It would never work. And then she's like, I'm just not really good with the computer. And I remember one time saying, no, it's not your fault. Oh, yes, it is. I'm not really good with the computer. And I remember saying to her, if the software is difficult to use, that's not your fault. That's the software designer's fault. She literally wouldn't believe me, you know. So I stopped. I stopped saying it. But with the shooting of a horse, yeah. Okay. Um, okay. It should be idiot proof. It is the fault of the designer. Okay. So, Tyson, how do you take into account the incompetence of people? Yeah, well, you do take it into account. You have to make what you make. There's a reason they refer to making software idiot proof. It's not that people are idiots. We don't mean to offend anybody. But we are trying to say that sometimes people will do things that you don't expect because they don't know what's in your head. And I remember the first time that ever happened when I was building software professionally. I'm trying to remember exactly what happened. I think it must have been I was excited about what I was building and I showed my wife and she jumped on it and she started doing things and just broke it. And I'm like, why did you do that? You know? And it was like my first real exposure to the idea that you have to make stuff idiot proof. You shouldn't be able to crash the system just by, with the click of a mouse. You shouldn't be able to crash the system with a click of a mouse. You know, it ought to, and the reason and the way you build software that does this is you understand things like sequence diagrams and state machine, state diagrams and the kinds of stuff we're going to be talking. How's that for a segue? That's a hard segue. Um, Let me see. Yeah, so the answer is you have to be ready to understand what crazy crap people are going to actually do. when they get on your system and build around that. So again, you got to look at the fish quite a bit to get down to that level. Like, what if they do this? And there's a lot of those. Okay. So this is the core idea. Wait, Mike, start over. Mike said, my favorite example is one of the EEs from work gave me something to write software for, a device, I presume, right, Mike, that lit on fire on my desk because of what the software I was working on was doing. Is that real? Is that really true, Mike? And was it something you wrote that made it start on fire, or did the software that you were trying to work with light your device on fire? Nice. They failed to think about what would happen if one of the resistors was left with power flowing through it for more than a few seconds. That's awesome. Yeah, that's not on you, man. That's on them. Oh, it was what you wrote. They neglected to tell you it could only be turned on for a minute. No, that's a perfect example, Mike. That's a really, really good example because it's back. Remember we talked about the curse of knowledge? Didn't we talk about that on Monday? Right? The curse of knowledge. You know things, but you've got to be able to communicate those, to other people. Again, part of what use cases come into, why they exist. All right, so this is the kind of the critical thing. The first bullet here, man, I swear if there was like one thing to take away from the class, the device itself is the knowledge storage instrument and should teach. I'm reading it. I don't usually read my slides, but I want to. And should teach you of its function in the moment in which you first encounter the device. You encounter it, and it teaches you of its function. Okay? Really, really well-designed devices and interfaces are the ones that little children, when they can like hack your phone, that's when it's that kind of clear. I once did a paper. I was working on, it was kinpoint stuff that led to Take a Name that I told you some of you know of. Uh, I wrote a paper that I published at Roots Tech in their technology. They have a technology conference that goes along with it. And the working title, I can't remember what the final title of the paper was, but the working title was Everything I Need to Know About Genealogical Interfaces I Learned from Angry Bird. And essentially, at the time, I was doing a kind of a thorough study and analysis of every sort of phone-based gaming interface that I could get my hands on. And Angry Birds was the creme de la creme at the time on phones. I don't know what the number one game is. I did that for several years. I played Angry Birds was the big one. What were the other ones? The phone-based games. This is 10 years ago. Probably, I tried Doodle Jump, never could get into it. Fruit Ninja, could not get into it. Never tried Jetpack Joyride. I don't even never heard of Where's My Water. Plants vs. Zombies, I did. What was my question? What was the great game interfaces for for the phone? I can't remember. Flappy Bird, not Floppy Bird. Clash of Clans, yes. Never got into it. Tried. Interesting. Never played Infinity Blade. But anyway, the idea, the fundamental idea, the thing that I'd kind of struck on was you take somebody like me with a PhD in computer science, and I would try to just get on like ancestry.com or family search or something. And there was so much demand placed on me cognitively to remember and to know. It was like learning to be an airline pilot, learning to be a 747 pilot, right? You weren't in there just having a hobby. Your hobby was like flying airplanes was your hobby, okay? And um, meanwhile, so it was like, genealogy stuff was like doing your taxes. So you'd sit down with genealogical interfaces and you'd be just confused. And meanwhile, little kid, 4-year-old kid would like start by hacking your phone and then find Angry Birds, launch it, and they're flinging birds, right? And I did an analysis of the actual complexity of, say, a pedigree chart as opposed to the user interface complexity of Angry Birds. And Angry Birds was dramatically bigger search space, but a little kid could jump in and start flinging birds and start racking up points with no problem. So what's wrong with this picture? That something with a bigger level of complexity was easy for 4-year-olds. Something with a smaller level of complexity, you had to basically be a tax accountant. You know. Kevin asked me, where does the line lie between needing to teach and being able to omit the tutorial? First of all, I'm going to go bold here, Kevin. For most products, if you have to have a tutorial, you're doing it wrong. Because of this principle here, this first bullet, that the device itself or the interface itself or the software itself is the tutorial. It teaches you of its function as you're ready to do it. It's very elusive. It's very difficult. Right. So a light switch won't have to tell you how it works because you can flip it on and off and learn what it does. Exactly. You're like, I wonder what this does. Blink, blink, and now you know. Right? So you can't just look at it and know, but as soon as you turn it on and off, the light goes on, the light goes off, you know. So that's an example, not even the best example, because I think there are some that just really, upon just inspection, you can kind of see what it is you could do with this item. If you're going to go pound nails and you see and someone hands you a hammer to pound nails, it's pretty obvious by the handle, the heft, the dynamics, the physics, the flat end on the nose, that how you're going to use this thing. And if you give a hammer to a little kid who's never seen one before and some nails, they can often figure that out, because of the device itself. Okay, we're out of time. So Riley, what's Paradox Game? Is that a brand? Okay. Uh, gotcha. Right. So in that case, right. Okay. So in a sense, it's like, someone hands you a bunch of chess pieces, right? 32 chess pieces, black and white, and a board. You have to have instructions. It's meant to be, that's the point, right? Okay, we're out of time. Let's cut loose, and when we come back, we'll do some more Don Norman, and we'll do some more use case next week. And by the way, we're 1/3 of the way through the semester. Can you believe that? 1/3. Yeah, and you're like, yeah, when's our grading going to be done, you jerk? I told you this week. Okay, 1/3. I'm excited about that. Okay, my friends, I'm going to shut it down.